I never planned to keep my success a secret. Life just worked out that way. Growing up in Singapore, my parents drilled the value of hard work and education into me. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you, my father would say, as he drove his taxi late into the night to fund my studies. My mother worked 2 jobs, and together they made sure I had everything I needed to excel. Their sacrifice paid off. I graduated top of my class in finance and landed a position at one of Asia's largest banks. By 28, I was the youngest division head in the bank's history, managing over $50 billion in corporate loans. But few knew this side of me. I met Alex at my friend's small cafe where I loved to work on weekends, helping out just to stay grounded. He walked in one rainy morning, ordered a latte, and smiled when I drew a little heart in the foam. "This is the best coffee I've had in months," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The secret is making it with care," I replied, wiping down the counter. He came back every weekend after that. We talked about everything: his work as an architect, his dreams of designing sustainable buildings, his close relationship with his family. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, enjoying how he saw me for who I was, not what I owned. When he finally asked me out, I said yes, without hesitation. Our first date was at a humble hawker center, sharing plates of char kway teow and laughing about nothing in particular. I fell in love with his kindness, his integrity, and how he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status. "My family is a bit traditional," Alex warned me before our first dinner with them. "They can be judgmental about status and career." "Don't worry," I assured him. "I can handle it." I wasn't prepared for Richard Tan, Alex's father. A self-made real estate tycoon, he dominated every room he entered. His wife, Eleanor, was equally intimidating in her designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair. Alex's sister, Vivian, took after their mother, down to her dismissive glance when I mentioned working at a cafe. "A cafe?" Richard's voice boomed across the dinner table. "Alex, I thought you said she went to university." "She did, Dad. Emily has a degree in—" "Clearly not putting it to good use," Richard interrupted. "In this family we believe in ambition, excellence, not serving coffee." I saw Alex's face redden, but he stayed silent. Eleanor touched her pearl necklace, a habit I'd learned meant she was about to deliver a carefully crafted insult. "Dear, perhaps you could help Emily find a more suitable position. The cleaning company we use is always hiring." Vivian snickered. "At least she'd have health insurance." I maintained my composure, years of high-stakes negotiations serving me well. "I enjoy my current work, but thank you for your concern." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle digs and patronizing advice. Alex apologized profusely on the drive home. "They'll come around," he promised. "They just need time to know you." But they didn't. Over the next year, as Alex and I grew closer, his family's disdain only intensified. Every family gathering became an exercise in endurance. Richard never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of my humble station. Eleanor orchestrated seating arrangements to keep me far from important guests. Vivian openly suggested Alex find someone more appropriate. When Alex proposed, their reaction was predictable. "A cafe worker?" Richard exploded. "Have you lost your mind?" "Dad, I love her." Alex stood firm. "Love won't maintain our family standing," Richard shot back. "If you marry her, don't expect any support from me." But Alex chose me. We had a small, beautiful wedding without his family present. Months passed. I continued my weekend cafe shifts, finding peace in the simple work while managing billion-dollar deals during the week. Alex respected my choice to keep my career private, understanding my need to be loved for myself, not my position. Then came the annual Tan family reunion. "We have to go," Alex insisted. "They're still family." I agreed, hoping time had softened their hearts. I was wrong. The reunion was held at Richard's mansion, a sprawling estate that screamed old money. The moment we arrived, I felt the familiar weight of judgmental stares. "Oh, the cafe girl still hasn't found a real job?" Vivian's voice carried across the garden. How persistent. Richard chuckled. He gathered everyone for his annual family address, champagne flowing freely as he boasted about the family's achievements. Then he spotted us. Alex, come tell everyone about your new project." His eyes slid past me. "And your wife can serve drinks. It's what she's good at, yes?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, a commotion erupted near the house. Richard's secretary came running out, face pale. "Mr. Ton, urgent call from the bank." "Not now," Richard waved her off. "We're celebrating." "Sir, it's about the emergency loans." "They're denied." Richard's smile faltered. "Impossible. I spoke with the division head yesterday." "No, sir. The new CEO is reviewing all major loans personally. They're requesting a meeting tomorrow." I felt my phone vibrate, my own secretary calling. I knew what this was about. Richard's company had been flagged for suspicious accounting, and as CEO of the corporate banking division, I had ordered a complete audit. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. "Excuse me," I said quietly, stepping away from the crowd to take my call. "Ma'am," my secretary whispered, "Chen Development's financials are worse than we thought. The audit shows systematic misrepresentation of assets." "Send me the files," I replied. "I'll review them tonight." When I returned, Richard was in full crisis mode. His face had lost its usual smugness, replaced by barely concealed panic. He was barking orders into his phone, while Eleanor hovered nearby, wringing her perfectly manicured hands. Vivian sidled up to me, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Looks like Daddy's company is having issues. Not that you'd understand business matters." "More champagne?" I smiled politely. "No, thank you. But I do have a question. How's your position at your father's company?" She preened. "I'm Executive Vice President of Operations," she declared. "Interesting. And what exactly do you do?" Her smile faltered. "I oversee things. Important things. Like the shell companies in the Cayman Islands." Vivian's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Several heads turned our way. "I don't know what you're talking about," she hissed. "The ones hiding your father's debt, or perhaps the inflated property valuations." Before she could respond, Richard's voice boomed across the garden. "Everyone, party's over, family emergency." As guests began to leave, Richard pulled Alex aside. "Son, I need your help." "The bank, they're being unreasonable. Your architecture firm has good relationships with other banks, yes?" Alex looked uncomfortable. "Dad, we're just a small firm. We don't handle those kinds of loans." "Useless!" Richard exploded. "Just like your choice in wife. If I lose this company, it's on your head for bringing bad luck into this family." That was enough. I stepped forward, my phone in hand. "Mr. Ton, I believe we have a meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. He barely glanced at me. "This doesn't concern you, coffee girl." "Actually, it does." I opened my banking app, displaying my executive profile. "I'm the CEO you'll be meeting." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and horror. Eleanor's pearl necklace clattered to the ground. Vivian looked like she might faint. "That's impossible," Richard stammered. "Emily Chen, CEO of Corporate Banking Division, Singapore United Bank," I stated calmly. "Your loan applications crossed my desk last week. The irregularities were concerning." Alex stared at me, mouth agape. "Emily, all this time, I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I own," I explained softly. "You gave me that gift, your family, not so much." Richard suddenly straightened, his businessman instincts kicking in. "Well, this is wonderful news. We're all family here. Surely we can work something out." "Family?" I echoed. "Like when you called me a gold digger at our wedding reception? Or when you told your business associates that Alex married beneath his station?" Eleanor stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Darling, we were just protecting our son. Surely you understand." "I understand perfectly. You judged me, humiliated me, and treated me like dirt because you thought I was beneath you. Now you want my help?" Vivian attempted damage control. Emily, sweetie, we were just teasing. It was all in good fun. I turned to Alex. Did you know about your sister's role in the company? He shook his head. She said she was handling operations. She's been helping your father hide debt and inflate assets. The audit shows years of financial manipulation. Richard's face turned purple. Now, see here, you can't just... I can and I will, I interrupted. Tomorrow's meeting isn't about loans, it's about a fraud investigation. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't dare. We're family. Family? I laughed softly. Let me share some wisdom from my father, the taxi driver you mocked at my wedding. He taught me that true family supports you, believes in you, and loves you regardless of your status. You've done none of those things. I took Alex's hand. The authorities will be contacting you tomorrow. I suggest you get your lawyers ready. As we turned to leave, Eleanor called out desperately, Wait, what about Vivian? She was just following orders. I paused at the door. Actions have consequences, Eleanor. Vivian chose to participate in fraud. She'll face the same investigation as everyone else. The drive home was silent. Finally, Alex spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have treated me differently if you knew? He thought for a moment. No. I fell in love with you, not your job. That's why I fell in love with you too. I squeezed his hand. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I just needed to know our love was real. What happens now? I sighed. Your father's company will be investigated. With the evidence we have, there will likely be criminal charges. Vivian too, if she's implicated. And us? That depends. Can you handle being married to a woman who makes more than your entire family combined? Alex laughed, the tension breaking. I think I can manage, but no more secrets. No more secrets, I promised. The next morning, the Tan family empire began to crumble. Richard arrived at my office precisely at 9 a.m., flanked by his lawyers. Gone was the arrogant tycoon. In his place sat a man who finally realized he wasn't the most powerful person in the room. The audit revealed systematic fraud spanning 5 years, I stated, sliding the report across my desk. Falsified valuations, hidden debts, shell companies. It's all here. We can explain, his lawyer began. No. The evidence has been forwarded to the authorities. Richard leaned forward. Emily, please, think about what this will do to the family name. Name? Like you thought about my reputation when you told everyone I was a gold digger? Before he could respond, my secretary interrupted. Ma'am, the police are here. What followed was a media circus. Chen Development CEO arrested for fraud, splashed across headlines. Vivian was taken into custody next, her designer handbag clutched to her chest as officers led her away. Eleanor had a very public breakdown at the country club. Alex stood by me through it all, though I knew it pained him to see his family fall apart. They did this to themselves, he said one evening as we watched the news coverage. You just exposed the truth. Weeks turned into months. The investigation uncovered more than even I had suspected. Richard had been running a complex scheme, using inflated property valuations to secure loans, then channeling the money through shell companies. Vivian had helped coordinate the fraud, her executive position nothing more than a front. The trial was swift. Richard and Vivian were both sentenced to prison. 8 years for him, 5 for her. Eleanor was spared criminal charges but lost everything in the asset forfeitures. One day, as autumn painted Singapore's gardens in golden hues, Eleanor appeared at my office. I know I have no right to be here, she began, her designer clothes replaced by simple cotton. But I need to say something. I gestured for her to continue. I was wrong about you, so terribly wrong. Tears filled her eyes. We judged you because we thought wealth and status were everything. Now I'm alone, living in a small apartment, working as a sales clerk. And I finally understand. Understand what? That character matters more than cash. You were kind to us even when we were cruel. You could have destroyed us completely, but you let the law take its course. That's real class." I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse for the first time. "What do you want, Eleanor?" "A chance. Not to be close, I know I don't deserve that, but to apologize to you and Alex, to try to be better." 6 months later, we hosted a small dinner party. Eleanor came, bringing homemade dumplings, a skill she'd learned in her new life. She was different now, humbler, more genuine. Alex was healing too, visiting his father and sister in prison, working through years of family dysfunction. As for me, I kept my weekend shifts at the cafe. Not because I needed to hide anymore, but because I loved the simplicity of making someone's day better with a perfect cup of coffee. One morning, a young woman came in looking defeated. "Rough day?" I asked, drawing a heart in her latte foam. "My boyfriend's parents think I'm not good enough," she sighed. "Wrong background, wrong job." I smiled, remembering where my own journey began. Let me tell you a story about family pride and what really matters in the end. Life has a way of teaching us its most important lessons. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters. Richard and Vivian learned this in prison. Eleanor learned it through humility, and I learned that being true to yourself is worth more than all the wealth in the world. Alex and I are expecting our first child now. We decided to name her Grace, a reminder that sometimes the hardest situations deserve a measure of mercy. Eleanor is excited to be a grandmother, and even Richard, through his prison letters, seems to be reflecting on what kind of legacy he really wants to leave. The cafe still stands, a humble reminder of where our story began. Sometimes customers recognize me, the banking CEO who serves coffee on weekends. They often ask why I still do it. My answer is simple. Every cup of coffee is a chance to make someone's day better. And at the end of our lives, isn't that what matters most? They usually smile, understanding or not. But I know my truth. Success isn't about power or revenge, or even proving others wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, showing kindness even when it's not deserved, and remembering that everyone, even those who hurt us, deserves a chance at redemption. As I write this, I'm sitting in the cafe, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of hope. Alex will join me soon, as he does every weekend. Eleanor might stop by with her dumplings. Life isn't perfect, but it's real and rich with lessons learned. And sometimes, when I'm making coffee or reviewing billion-dollar deals, I think about my father's words. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. He was right, but he missed something important. Integrity, compassion, and the courage to be yourself, those are things nobody can take either. Story 2. I had no intention of creating an empire. When my husband Michael's 80-hour work weeks as a corporate lawyer left me alone with our large home in Boston's upscale Beacon Hill neighborhood, it began as a coping mechanism for my loneliness. What started out as handcrafted jewelry sold on Etsy evolved into something they couldn't have predicted. Not least of all is Patricia Wellington, my mother-in-law, who never squandered an occasion to tell me that I was inferior to her beloved son. At our monthly family lunches, Mom would add, "Another craft fair, dear." She spoke in a condescending tone. How charming. If only she were aware that last week was the millionth order sent from my small handmade company. If only my spouse realized that I was developing a brand that would eventually surpass the value of his whole legal practice, while he was charging $800 an hour to become a partner. It's getting ahead of itself, though. I'll begin from the beginning. 5 years ago, I was merely a graphic artist named Emily Chen Wellington, who fell in love with a lawyer from a wealthy Boston family. The Wellingtons never let people forget that they can trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower. "At least you're Chinese," his mother told me when Michael proposed. "These days, that's almost acceptable. Your kids will excel at math." Then I ought to have run. Rather, like my immigrant parents did when they first arrived in America, I suffered and smiled as I had been taught. Keep your head down. Put up a lot of effort, and success will come. Those lonely nights gave rise to the concept for Luxcraft. I created contemporary jewelry with an Asian fusion touch by combining my graphic design expertise with traditional Chinese craft methods that my grandmother had taught me. After I listed my first work on Etsy, It sold within hours. It was an exquisite jade necklace with a modern geometric pattern wrapped in silver wire. "I like that, honey." Michael hardly looked up from his case files when I informed him. "Perhaps concentrate on redesigning the house instead. Next month, the partners will join us for supper." While Patricia organized charity galas and Michael rose through the corporate ranks, I did concentrate on the house by turning our 3-car garage into a studio. I was creating something groundbreaking. My designs steal ideas from publications, fashion blogs, and celebrities. Orders came in more quickly than I could complete them. To assist with manufacturing, I recruited other immigrant ladies from my mother's church. Many of them, like Mrs. Zhang and Mrs. Kim, were engineers and artists back home, but were unable to find employment in the United States. We collaborated to develop a manufacturing system that scaled operations without sacrificing handcrafted quality. I studied supply chains, marketing, and e-commerce in my nightly online business classes. Luxcraft.com is the evolution of my tiny Etsy store. After starting with jewelry, we moved on to handbags and finally home decor. Every item conveyed a narrative. Combining Western design with Eastern workmanship, the length of our waiting lists increased. Despite the calls from venture capitalists, little changed at home. Michael was too preoccupied to realize that I would no longer be using his credit cards. At gatherings, Patricia continued to introduce me as Michael's crafty wife. Judge Wellington, my father-in-law, still referred to me as the town's artist. That gave the impression that it was a mental illness. The supper that made all the difference then arrived. Patricia's house on Beacon Hill was the site of a memorable family get-together. Every member of the Wellington family, including Michael's siblings and their well-off wives, physicians, attorneys, and investment bankers, would be present. Everything. We had recently finalized an agreement to distribute our products to a large chain of upscale department stores, therefore I was late. Michael was already there, discussing their most recent cases with his brother. "We were just talking about you, Emily darling." As I walked into the formal dining area, Patricia cried out, "20." Wellington eyes looked at me. "Tom, I was aware of it. She used the same one while talking about the assistants. Patricia told us about your little internet store." Amanda, adjusting her Hermes scarf, added, "That's Michael's sister-in-law. How much of an entrepreneur are you?" As I sat down, I noticed the metro. I was seated at the far end of the table, away from the crucial discussions, as Patricia had planned. The first course was served by the caterers, spoons made of mother-of-pearl with imported caviar. I didn't pay attention to my phone buzzing in my handbag. "You may wait for another message from the Amazon acquisition team." Patricia tapped her crystal glass to draw attention to her announcement. "What's best for the Wellington name has been on my mind." Michael grinned as his making partner this year finally joined the family history of true success. She kept kissing me with her social grin because I had taken a drink of alcohol. We must talk about Emily's pastime. Like a poisoned dart, the word lingered in the air. As Patricia began her well-prepared speech, I noticed that my cheeks were flushed. A Wellington spouse has responsibilities and expectations to meet. We are not your typical folks that have to sell things on the internet. Michael, my love, it's time, don't you think? Emily, concentrate on more suitable pursuits. There is a vacancy on the hospital board. Time and time again, my phone buzzed. Mom's correct. Taking off his Hermes tie, Michael said, "My income is more than plenty for us both. This is a craft. At this level of society, it's a little humiliating." The Wellingtons all nodded in agreement with my social shortcomings, yet the buzzing continued. At last, I took out my phone. I missed 5 calls from my investment banker, 10 from my lawyer, and 1 message that would make everyone in Wellington smile condescendingly. "The last offer from your massive Amazon is $80 million in cash plus shares. Tonight," Nick will respond. Patricia was scowling at me for breaking dinner etiquette when I looked up from my phone. If only she had anticipated it. Patricia went on with her talk about what a Wellington spouse should do. A weird serenity descended upon me. 5 years of being treated with contempt and like a charity case who was fortunate enough to marry into their cherished family. It was almost over. "Are you even paying attention, Emily?" Patricia's piercing voice interrupted my train of thought. This is significant. The name Wellington will work perfectly. Every head at the table turned as I interrupted and got to my feet. Patricia had never been interrupted by me before. In fact, I believe its value is set to increase significantly. Michael scowled. Don't be theatrical, Emily. Mother is only attempting to assist. Actually, I responded in a firm voice, my home has made an announcement. I looked straight at Patricia. You're correct. Now let's talk about my small pastime. I opened my phone and started reading the email. After doing a thorough assessment, Amazon is happy to make our best and last offer to purchase Luxcraft Incorporated. Mrs. Chen Wellington, $80 million in cash and $20 million in Amazon stock options, with the possibility of an extra $50 million in 3 years or less. The ensuing hush was deafening. Michael's $400 dinner plate clattered with his $4. Patricia muttered that it was impossible. She had a pallid face. Last year, your little internet craft store brought in $42 million. I kept becoming used to my work. We collaborate with Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, and Bloomingdale's. We have a 6-month waiting list for bespoke creations. And that contribution to charity you boasted about before, Patricia? The one where the Asian American Arts Foundation received $50,000 from you. Actually, I and the biggest anonymous donor provided that. Judge Wellington raised his bushy eyebrows. Are you claiming that your craft company is worth $100 million? No. Grinning, I looked at my phone once more. This new message claims that Google just rejected Amazon's offer. It is currently valued at $120 million. Michael got up so fast that his chair toppled over. However, the breadwinner, though, is me. Calmly, I said, I make 7 figures in that in a month. You thought I was playing with beads on those nights. While you were billing hours, I was creating an empire. More than 200 women, primarily immigrants, who had advanced degrees but were unable to find suitable employment, now have jobs thanks to my efforts. Suddenly, Amanda's Hermes scarves appeared a little snug around her neck. However, you remained silent. Did you think I was real? Glancing around the table, I inquired, would I have been taken seriously by any of you? Additionally, you believed that becoming a partner in a legal firm was the pinnacle of success. Patricia was well enough to try to limit the damage. Well, that's fantastic news. Emily has potential, I always claimed. No, I interrupted her once again. I was humiliating, you always stated. That your son was superior than me. That my small pastime was a disgrace to the city of Wellington. I looked at my spouse. And you, Michael, how recently have you inquired about my work? How recently did you visit the garage to check what I was building? You said that I was squandering. As years of suppressed wrath suddenly found a voice, the room whirled with tension. I wasn't done, though. I reached inside my handbag and took out another piece of paper. For weeks I had been holding on to something, waiting for the appropriate time. I handed the document across the table to Michael and added, There's one more thing. I nearly forgot to bring it up because I've been so preoccupied with the acquisition talks. My lawyer sent them to me last week. The papers were taken up by Michael. His hands shook a little. As he read the divorce title petition, his face became white instead of crimson. However, why? He stumbled. We can resolve this. I'm aware of the money now. I responded by gathering my belongings for just that reason. Michael, 5 years. 5 years of treating me like a charity case, dismissing me, and disparaging my efforts. You nodded and grinned while your mother tore me down for 5 years. I'm not leaving for the money. It's just what gave me the confidence to do it at last. I turned to the startled table as a whole. And Patricia, too. Recall that you stated last month that the Wellingtons don't make fair trinkets. They only wear genuine jewels. You're wearing the necklace you boasted you got at Tiffany's. I own it. Our largest wholesale customer is Tiffany's. Patricia's hand touched the $12,000 necklace and shot to her throat. She would be awake all night. I could almost picture her going over in her head all the praise she would get for her wonderful taste. Judge Wellington regained his voice as I approached the door. You can't merely, young woman, look here. I can, in fact. I paused at the entrance and stated that. Michael, one more thing. Do you recall how you constantly demanded that I sign a prenuptial agreement to safeguard the wealth of the Wellington family? You may wish to document 7.3, which states that, unless otherwise noted, Any business assets created during the marriage are regarded as joint property. Michael's face became green instead of white. I grinned. Do not be concerned. I have no interest in partnering with your legal practice. However, I felt you ought to be aware. You are technically the owner of half of my business. I sold your shares to my staff last week for $1 while you were doing it. They merited it. I was delighted by the cacophony of voices behind me as I left. This was not the end, however. They had only just begun to learn about meeting the wrong person while naked. The following morning, there was a media boom. The artisan company owned by an immigrant lady brings in $120 million, made headlines in all of the major business magazines. Journalists kept calling to ask how a mere craftsman had created such a vast enterprise, right beneath the claws of Boston society. I hadn't been kicked out of the Wellington family group chat yet, but that's where the main drama was happening. Patricia, we are damaged by her. At the club, everyone is conversing. Amanda. In order to get business advice, my friends are requesting me to put them in touch with Emily. Michael. Calm down, mother. My co-workers are complimenting me on my wife's business ventures. Jed. Wellington. Do you want to tell me how we met, Sam? Children. I turned off my phone and grinned as I entered Luxcraft's headquarters, a refurbished textile mill in Cambridge that housed more than 200 workers, the most of whom were immigrant women like my mother. My first employee and current chief operating officer, Mrs. Jang, greeted me at the door. She smiled knowingly and continued, "The Google acquisition team is here. You won't believe the other people in the lobby either." As I turned the corner, Patricia Wellington was pacing uneasily while holding onto her expensive handmade necklace. "Dear Emily." She froze upon seeing me. With a forced social grin, she started. "Mrs. Wellington, I've been thinking about last night." I gently interrupted. "It will be necessary for you to make an appointment with my assistant. I am currently meeting with the leadership team of Google." "We are family, though," she objected. "Are we?" I arched an eyebrow. "Last evening, I was clearly not Wellington material, as you stated. Please pardon me now." Google's senior executives waded through the glass walls of our main conference room, where I passed her. I saw Patricia's expression when she recognized that tech behemoths were pursuing the craft pastime she had rejected. The weeks that followed flew by. With or without potential, Google's offer was $150 million more than Amazon's closing price. The narrative went viral. Her blue blood in-laws make fun of her pastime as an immigrant woman creates a $1 million enterprise. An interview was requested by all major networks. Colleagues at Michael's law firm began sending their spouses to Luxcraft for trunk displays. The same women from society who had ignored me at Patricia's parties are now called daily, and they want to fund my next project. However, the closing supper for the transaction was the most memorable event. The same upscale eatery where the Wellingtons had formerly made me feel alienated was now rented out by Google. I noticed Michael and his family sneaking into the side entrance as I got up to speak. To be there, it clearly pulled strings. I started 5 years ago. I was informed that immigrant women should be aware of their place in society, and that craft fairs were inappropriate for some social classes. That achievement required taking conventional routes. Patricia moved in her chair uneasily. However, I learned something different from my mother. Success, according to her, isn't about blending in with other people. You have to construct your own. I pointed to the immigrant ladies who were now Luxcraft executives. We did more than merely create a business together. We created a community. We demonstrated how hobbies can transform lives, and how craft fairs can grow into empires, and that sometimes the folks who write you off wind up being the ones who see you succeed. From the corner of my eye, I saw the room erupt in cheers. Michael looked at me as if he had never seen me before, and I saw Patricia wipe away her tears. Following the meal, Mrs. John came up to me with information that completed my triumph. A Distinguished Innovation Award has been chosen for our immigrant employment program. Patricia's favorite project, the Wellington Foundation for Social Progress, is the presenter. The very persons they denigrated will have to get an award. Mrs. John chuckled. Karma is real. 3 months later, the divorce was completed. Michael made every effort to regain my affection. I'm now enthralled with my true entrepreneurial spirit. But certain bridges cannot be unburned, as I said to the divorce court. In Back Bay, I purchased a penthouse near to Patricia's favorite social club. I saw her social circle lining up at the upscale craft flagship shop across the street every morning, boasting about their close relationship with the founder. I was invited to speak at the Women's Leadership Conference at Michael's legal business last week. How to succeed. When others doubt you is the theme of breaking through. I said no. I was too busy starting our new foundation, which gives immigrant women entrepreneurs seed money. After decades of waiting for the Wellingtons to join, Patricia's Country Club, the last twist of the Knife King yesterday, welcomed me to become an honorary member. I agreed, but only on the proviso that they allow membership to our other immigrant leaders, including Mrs. John. However, things aren't done that way. The committee for membership sputtered. Then maybe it's time for a change. They agreed, I said. I sat at the nicest table, which Patricia had always claimed as her own, for coffee at the club this morning. I open an email from a young immigrant lady who read my tale as I'm drinking my latte. You demonstrate to me that we can create our own tables when others refuse to let us sit at theirs, and that our aspirations don't have to fit into someone else's box. I appreciate you disproving them. I glanced around the room, where the old money now avidly sought out fresh ideas, and the society ladies vied for my attention. Patricia was also present. As her previous social group approached my table, she noticed me sitting in a corner and gave me a little, dejected nod. At last, she realized what they had made fun of. They had developed an infatuation with my origins, my inventiveness, and my small pastime. I returned the nod and went back to drinking my coffee. After all, the finest form of retaliation is success. But altering the rules, that is invaluable. It buzzed on my phone. Another request for an interview, this time from Forbes. They wanted to write about me in their issue on self-made women. I smiled at the proposed title. How an Immigrant's Hobby Upended High Society and Created a $150 million Empire, the Craft Queen of Boston. At times, I believed that getting even wasn't the greatest form of retaliation. They must look up to see you because of the expanding supply. And occasionally, those who reject your aspirations have to see them come true. Through the windows of the empire, they never thought you could create. From a distance. Story 2. Hello, I'm James Martinez. This is the tale of how the biggest tragedy of my famous family was greed. They were unaware of what they were actually purchasing, or rather, what they weren't, but they believed they were obtaining a failing restaurant. For 30 years, Casa Martinez, my father's restaurant, had been the center of downtown Chicago. It was more than simply a company. It was the legacy of our family, constructed using the Mexican recipes my grandmother brought with her and the aspirations my father had when he came to this country with nothing but hope in his pockets. I learned every recipe, every trick, and every little detail that made our meals unique while growing up in that kitchen. My early years were accompanied by the aroma of freshly made tortillas and roasted chiles, but once my mother died, everything was different. My father then married Diana Kane 2 years later. She had 2 boys from her previous marriage, Marcus and Alex. From the beginning, they viewed Casa Martin as a gold mine just waiting to be mined, rather than as a heritage passed down through the family. They wanted everything after seeing our devoted clientele, our exclusive location, and our stellar reputation. They played decently at beginning. While her boys assumed managerial roles, Anna would assist at the restaurant and learn the ins and outs. Still mourning and lonely, my father was simply relieved to have a full house once more. As the chief chef, I kept my mother's recipes alive while watching it all from the kitchen. Diana would reply, "James, honey," with eyes as icy as ice and a voice as sweet as syrup. "Isn't it time to update these traditional recipes? They're really conventional. Fusion food is popular right now. However, fusion was not what our customers wanted. My grandmother's mole sauce for the tamales was what they came for." Preparing for the customs that make Casa Martinez unique took 2 days. It was demonstrated by our income. We had never been doing better. Then my dad fell ill. Cancer was merciless and violent. Between hospital stays and chemotherapy sessions, everything occurred extremely quickly. Diana began to make adjustments with her son. They replaced suppliers, brought on new employees, and gradually distanced me from operational choices. James Marcus would dismiss my worries about their costly renovations by saying, "Just concentrate on cooking. Let those who know what they're doing handle the company." I had effectively operated the restaurant for the previous 5 years and had a business degree from Northwestern. However, they conveniently overlooked the fact that I once heard Diana and her sons in the office one evening when I was wrapping up. Their remarks stopped me cold, even though I hadn't intended to listen in. "We can accomplish it," the lawyer says. Diana stated that Robert is too ill to handle his assets effectively. "If we can demonstrate that the restaurant is failing, we can obtain an emergency power of attorney and, should he recover, force a sale." "But," Alex protested, "it's not failing. It's generating more revenue than before." Marcus laughed. "That's why we have to help it fail." A few of convenient kitchen mishaps, some negative reviews, and a few health code infractions. I was feeling nauseous. They intended to purposefully destroy my father's life's work. However, they committed a critical error. They didn't realize how much I had discovered over the years. They were unaware that my father had given me control over a number of important company operations 6 months prior, when he was initially diagnosed. Not the actual eatery or the building. Until his death, he wanted those to remain in his name. He did, however, give me something far more worthwhile. I watched them carry out their strategy over the course of the following few weeks. We got health code infractions all of a sudden. Unknown negative reviews surfaced online. Equipment began to malfunction inexplicably. Our reputation suffered, and I could see my father's stress levels rising. Diana was ideal in her role, expressing worry and encouragement, while implying that selling could be the wisest course of action. She tells my father, "Darling, the stress isn't good for your health. Let's simply sell it and concentrate on getting better." My father was frail from treatment when they finally made their move at the hospital. Diana's attorney arrived. They possessed documents detailing the restaurant's recent difficulties, the growing debt they had accrued, and a plan to sell the establishment. For a little charge of $1, they may now keep it in the family. My father stared at me, exhausted and bewildered. "What do you think, James?" Diana interrupted me before I could respond. "James gets it. James, don't you think this is for the best? If you demonstrate that you are deserving of the job, you can still be the chef." I nodded slowly, after glancing at my father, and then Diana's arrogant expression. "Dad, if that's your desire." We all assembled at the restaurant for the formal handover the next day. As a celebration of saving a faltering family business, the Anna had gathered their friends. The attorney laid out the documents as Diana virtually jumped with joy. She pointed to the line at the bottom of the transfer form and said, "Just sign here, James. In any case, it's only worth $1. I glanced up at their delighted grins and signed my name steadily. "Thanks to your poor administration." "Well done," silently, I said. "You own the business and the building." "At last." "Oh," said Marcus, "we can now make some significant changes in this area." As I made my way to the door, I packed up my personal belongings from the office, including my mother's old recipe box. Diana yelled, "Remember to arrive early tomorrow. You can't take it easy just because you're no longer the owner." I smiled a little as I turned around. "I will not be returning tomorrow or ever." "What are you talking about, really?" Alex insisted. "I mentioned that you recently purchased a building and a company name. However, my father transferred something else to me 6 months ago. Not all of the recipes are familiar to me, each and every one. My personal holding company has full copyright and trademark protection for them. I also created the logo for the Casa Martinez brand. Above all, I stopped and observed their faces. I personally own all of the supplier agreements and connections." As I went on, Diana's face lost its color. "Congratulations, then, on your new eatery. Whatever you intend to serve, I have no doubt that you will do it brilliantly. The food won't be Casa Martinez, and those vendors you have been collaborating with. Beginning tomorrow, they will deliver to my new address across town." The ensuing hush was deafening. Diana's well-groomed hands clutched the desk's edge, her knuckles whitened. "You can't do this," she said in a tremulous whisper. "The restaurant owns those recipes. In fact, I opened my briefcase and took out another set of papers. they disposed of everything, which was months ago lawfully transferred to my business, Martinez Culinary Group, LLC. Dad was an expert in his field. He is far from stupid, even though he may be ill. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing my shirt. You little snake. You planned this all along. Careful, I warned calmly. Assault charges wouldn't look good for your new business. And yes, I planned this right after I overheard you plotting to deliberately tank my father's legacy. Their lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was frantically flipping through the sale documents. This is highly unusual, he stammered. The intellectual property should have been included in the sale. Check page 37. I suggested the sale clearly specifies physical assets and business name only. You really should read the fine print more carefully. Diana's face contorted with rage. We'll sue you. Well, sorry for what I interrupted. For legally protecting my family's heritage. For stopping you from destroying what my father built. Go ahead. Oh, and while you're at it, you might want to explain to the judge how you manipulated a cancer patient into selling his life's work for $1. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. Another stuff. I submitted all documentation of your deliberate health code violations to the city health department. They're very interested in speaking with the new owners. I'd expect them first thing tomorrow morning. As I walked out of Casa Martinez for the last time, I heard Diana's anguished scream of rage. But I didn't look back. I had work to do. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. While Diana and her son struggled with health department investigation and tried to create new recipes for their empty restaurant, I was busy building something new. I opened Marla Martinez's kitchen just across town, taking our loyal staff, suppliers, and most importantly, our recipes with me. The grand opening was packed with familiar faces. Customers had been coming to us for decades. Who knew the taste of our authentic food couldn't be replicated? Word spread quickly. Food critics raved about how we preserved the traditional flavors while upgrading to a beautiful new location. Our old customers followed us, bringing new ones with them. Within months, we had lines out the door every weekend. Meanwhile, Diana's version of Casa Martinez floundered without our recipes, suppliers, or experienced staff. They couldn't recreate what made the restaurant special. They tried serving generic Mexican food, then attempted fusion cuisine, but nothing worked. The reviews were brutal. It's like a soul has been ripped out of the place, one reviewer wrote. The magic is gone. 3 months after their takeover, my father's cancer went into remission. The doctors called it a miracle, but I think it was pure stubbornness. He wasn't going to let go until he saw justice served. The first day he was strong enough, he came to Mama Martinez's kitchen. He walked through the dining room, tears in his eyes, touching the familiar decorations. We'd moved from the old place. The photos of our family, the hand-painted plates my mother had collected, the string of peppers my grandmother had hung for good luck in the kitchen. He watched as I prepared his favorite dish, chili, and noguera, just like his mother taught me. You did good, mijo, he said softly. You protected our legacy better than I ever could. Biana and her sons tried to hold out, but the numbers didn't lie. 6 months after their triumphant takeover, they were forced to sell the building at a massive loss. The final insult. The buyer was my newly formed real estate company. I kept the building, but leased the space to a local art gallery. Sometimes I walked by the old location, remembering the sounds and smells that filled it for so many years. The Casa Martinez sign is gone, but the memories remain. Last week, I received a letter from Diana's lawyer offering to reconcile our differences and propose a partnership. I sent back a simple response. Some things aren't for sale at any price. Marla Martinez's kitchen has now expanded to 3 locations, each one serving the same recipes that my grandmother brought from Mexico all those years ago. My father, now fully recovered, comes in every Sunday to have lunch and tell stories to the customers about how it all began. As for Diana and her sons, last I heard, he left Chicago. Their dreams of an easy takeover shattered. They learned the hard way that a restaurant isn't just a building or a business. It's the heart and soul that goes into every dish. The love passed down through generations, the traditions that can't be bought or stolen. Yesterday, a young culinary student asked me why I didn't just let them have the old restaurant and start fresh somewhere else. I showed her my mother's old recipe box. The pages worn and stained with decades of use because some legacies, I told her, are worth fighting for. The old Casa Martinez building still stands downtown now, filled with beautiful artwork instead of dining tables. But the real Casa Martin is the soul of it. Lives on in Mama Martinez's kitchen, where every dish we serve carries the story of a family that refused to be beaten, a legacy that couldn't be stolen, and the sweet taste of justice served piping hot. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in our case, it was served at exactly 165 degrees, just like my grandmother's perfect enchiladas. Story 4. This is the tale of how my ideal sister's ideal wedding devolved into a nightmare. My name is Emily Parker. I didn't desire retribution, but sometimes the truth just won't go away. When I was 6 months old, the Parkers adopted me. My biological sister Kate was born 2 years after my adoption, and my parents, particularly my father, James Parker, constantly made sure I didn't feel different from her. For 28 years at least, that's what I believed. Parker Innovation Labs, a tiny research and development company that developed unique solutions for industrial firms, was Dad's pride and pleasure. While Kate thrived in dance routines and beauty pageants, I grew up witnessing Father put his all into it and spend late hours in his home office going over ideas and proposals. I inherited my father's enthusiasm for invention. I learned every facet of the company's operations throughout my summer internship. I started working as a project manager full-time after receiving my degree in engineering. 8 years have passed since then. Since then, I've risen to the position of Chief Innovation Officer, assisting in the growth of our little family firm into a $100 million market leader. Kate, on the other hand, has achieved success as a social media influencer by sharing posts on luxury, friendship, and lifestyle. The issue began when Kate became engaged to Thomas Bradford II, who works for Bradford Technologies, one of our main rivals. Business-wise, this family combination will be ideal. At Kate's engagement celebration at our family home, Mom cried uncontrollably. Everyone in the IT sector had been invited, and the champagne was pouring. The murmured talks that ceased when I entered rooms were warning flags that I should have seen sooner. Board members' odd expressions, and the fact that my father had been avoiding one-on-one sessions with me for weeks. Kate's crystal champagne flute clinked, attracting everyone's interest. Under the chandelier lights, she stood on the big staircase of the mansion, her beautiful dress glistening. Beside her, Thomas appeared to be the proud future CEO that he was being prepared to be. "We appreciate everyone's attendance at our engagement celebration," Kate smiled. "But tonight, we have another matter to attend to." When she spotted me in the crowd, my stomach fell. "Emily, my darling sister." Fake worry was evident in her voice. "We must discuss the money." There was silence in the room. I gripped my glass more tightly. How much money? The $2 million that is absent from the business's financial records. For dramatic effect, she waited. "For the last year, you have been embezzling money." The charge struck me like a punch to the body. The room exploded in whispers. I turned to my father for assistance, but he refused to look at me. "What are you discussing?" I was able to state that I would never. Thomas interrupted and took out a folder, saying, "We have proof. Financial documents that link your personal accounts to a string of deviously concealed transactions that demonstrate systemic theft." The room seemed to be whirling. "I would never take from the business. You know that, Dad. I have done all of this for." Kate snapped, "Save it. You are only the adopted one attempting to take what is properly the Parker family's. The moment has come to repay it all." Her statements were followed by a deafening hush. I waited for my father to speak out, to say anything, to protect me. "Rather," he nodded slowly. "Emily," he added softly, "the evidence is pretty clear. I believe it would be better if you quit right away. If you return the money, there won't be any costs. Everything I believed to be true about my family was destroyed in that instant. 28 years of kinship and affection collapsed beneath the burden of a single charge." Carefully, I placed my glass on an adjacent table. "Do you want me to step down?" "Okay." I resign. But before you accuse me, you ought to look more closely at those financial documents." I ignored the glances and comments as I made my way to my car, leaving the party with my head held high. Kate's voice came echoing from the doorway. "Remember to return your business phone and laptop. You shouldn't remove any proof, in our opinion." Even though I was on the verge of tears, I smiled. My sister had never bothered to find out how the business truly operated since she had always been so preoccupied with looks. I'd been recording everything for the last 3 years, but she didn't know it. Sitting at my home office that evening, I started carrying out the backup plan I had made, but hoped to never employ. Having witnessed the collapse of previous family enterprises for years, I had learned to be ready for treachery at all times. I retrieved my own laptop and gained access to a secure server that was unknown to Kate and Thomas. Every email, transaction, each piece of proof demonstrating who had actually been embezzling money from the business. Everything was there, just waiting to be shown. A week from now was Kate's wedding. With over 500 guests, including all of the biggest names in the IT sector, she organized a lavish ceremony in the most exclusive location in the city. She had worked for months to make sure it would be the year's most anticipated social gathering. She had no idea that I had other plans for her big day. Sometimes damaging someone's future isn't the greatest form of retaliation. It's about exposing the reality of their history. My phone rang with a text from Kate as I was getting ready for bed that evening. "Don't even consider attending the wedding. Your photo is in security." I used a straightforward happy face emoji in my response. She was unaware that I might ruin her ideal day without an invitation. After all, I was the one who created the venue security system. Everything would alter during the following 7 days. I had to make some calls first, though. Kate's wedding day morning. Dawn. Clear and bright. At the presidential suite of the Peninsula Hotel, most likely, she was getting her hair and cosmetics done. After a hectic week, I was in my home office finalizing preparations. I had arranged meetings with the SEC, contacted important industry contacts, and acquired indisputable proof of what had actually been taking place at Parker Innovation Labs. However, I had completely forgotten about our company's original programmer, so my most crucial call had been to call Kate. Kate and Thomas believed that Dad had retired 6 months ago, despite the fact that Joe had been working for him since the beginning, developing our core software systems. They were unaware that he still had backdoor access to every server owned by the corporation. I received everything I asked for. In the morning, I texted Joe. Everyone was downloaded and checked. He answered. The master passwords and matters are never changed by them. Thinking of Kate's expression when she realized her cunning financial tricks weren't so cunning made me smile. She accused me of stealing after all the money. Every penny could be linked to her fiancé's family's offshore accounts. I parked my car 2 blocks away from the St. Regis Hotel at exactly 2:01 p.m. The wedding was set to take place in the grand ballroom at 4 p.m. Security was tight. Kate had made sure of that, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd installed the hotel's entire security infrastructure 3 years ago through Parker Innovation Labs. I walked to the service entrance, nodding to the kitchen staff who recognized me from the system installation. My fingerprints still worked on the biometric locks. Another oversight. I made my way to the control room where my old friend Marcus was working. Security? Emily? He looked surprised. They said you were banned. I handed him a USB drive. Marcus, remember when I saved your job last year? After that breach? I need a favor. 20 minutes later, I was settled in the ballroom's upper control booth below. Guests were arriving. The who's who of the tech industry, all dressed in their finest man, was greeting people wearing an expensive new dress. Gad stood with Thomas's parents, probably discussing the merger they'd announced yesterday. The merger that would save Bradford Technologies from bankruptcy using Parker Innovation Labs. Money. My money. The money. Kate accused me of stealing. At 3:55 p.m., Kate made her entrance for photos. She looked stunning in her designer gown, beaming as cameras flashed. Thomas waited at the altar, looking every bit the program. I waited until the ceremony began, until the minister asked if anyone had any objections. That's when I activated Joe's program. The ballroom's lights dimmed, The massive screens meant for wedding photos came to life, and they're in high definition. Begin playing a presentation I titled, "The Truth About the Parker Family Fortune." Financial records, emails, secret meetings, every corrupt dealings, every stolen dollar, every lie. Display for all to see? Kate's face went from confusion to horror as she watched proof of her fiancé's embezzlement scheme unfold on screen. "Turn it off," Thomas shouted, but the hotel's systems weren't responding to anyone but me. Then came the recording, a conversation between Kate and Thomas from 3 months ago. "Once we framed Emily for the missing money, Dad will have to give me control of the company." Kate's voice filled the ballroom. The adopted brat never deserved it anyway. "And once we merge the companies," Thomas replied, "we can sell off Parker's assets to cover Bradford's debts. Your father will never know what hit him." The screen switched to security footage of them doctoring financial records in Thomas's office, carefully cracking the trail that would lead to me. The ballroom erupted in chaos. I emerged from the control booth, walking calmly down the main aisle. Kate stood frozen in her white dress, mascara running down her cheeks. "Security," she screamed when she saw me. "They work for me," I said quietly. "Or rather, they work for Parker Innovation Lab Security Division, which I built from the ground up." Dad stepped forward, his face ashen. "Emily, I save it." I cut him off. "Check your email. You'll discover copies of everything you just saw, plus record of every invention and customer relationship I brought to the firm. My resignation clauses are attached. You have 1 hour to accept them." "You're bluffing," Thomas hissed. "You've got nothing." I grinned. The CC disagrees. "They're quite interested in Bradford Technologies' inventive accounting, as are your shareholders." I gestured at numerous pale-face board members in the throng. "Alvin, Kate, you were correct about one thing. I'm not a genuine Parker. I'm better. I grew the firm into what it is now. While you were busy taking pictures and plotting burglary, Mom tried to approach me, but I held out my hand. My terms are straightforward. Parker Innovation Labs is 51% owned by myself. Kate and Thomas are prohibited from working for the firm as of right now. Dad, you can continue to serve as CEO, but I will have the last say in how you vote. What if we say no?" Kate's voice wavered. "After that, I make everything public. It is possible that Parker Innovation Labs may survive the controversy. Bradford Technologies will not." I look at the astonished visitors. "I advise you everyone to return home. There won't be a wedding today, in my opinion." Lawyers, paperwork, and tears filled the following few hours. By midnight, the stock of Bradford Technology, the business I had helped create, was in freefall due to AI's dominant position. Additionally, Kate's flawless wedding turned into the year's biggest controversy. A week later, I was sitting in my new office, which was officially Dad's, looking over acquisition offers for Bradford Technology's remaining assets. My work was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dad appeared older than I had ever seen him. "I should have trusted you," he said. "Indeed, you ought to have. Can she remedy this for us?" I considered it, not as father and daughter perhaps. At the engagement reception, you forfeited that privilege. But as associates in business, let's see. I learned my first lesson in invention from you. Before you can rebuild anything better, sometimes you have to pull it down entirely. He chuckled and gave a sorrowful nod. I looked out at the metropolitan skyline as I turned back to my window. It buzzed on my phone. Kate texted. "I apologize for being incorrect on everything." I didn't respond. Some people apologize too late. I disagree that success is the best form of retaliation. Making individuals confront their own falsehoods is the finest kind of retaliation. Kate desired a memorable wedding for everybody. She got what she wanted then, not in the manner she had intended. I remain the same guy who enjoys constructing things and innovating. The only thing that has changed is that everyone is now aware of my abilities, and I'll never get a call. Once more, it's the adopted one.